In a saturated market with so many listings for guests to choose from, it's now more important than ever to really stand out from the pack. And one way to do it is to have awesome design and eye-catching photographs. I'm going to give you a comprehensive step-by-step guide on how we design our Airbnbs. The whole exact process from planning to designing to shopping to getting things set up to the final touches and how we stock it. It feels kind of like a brag, but we consistently get 5-star reviews, many of them mentioning how awesome the design was. So how did we do it? And more importantly, how can you do it? Because there is so much detail to cover and no one wants to watch a whole hour of video, I'm going to split this up into 2 parts. This week is focused on the planning and designing, while next week will be execution. Make sure you come back for that second video. Also, I'll be referencing this tiny house mainly because it's accessible and I live near it. But I use this exact same process on our other beach house, which is 10 times the size and a completely different style, and that worked equally well. So I think this design guide should cover most kinds of short-term rental listings. Now with all that out of the way, I have 9 steps for you. The first 4 are going to be in this video. Step number 1 is to define your audience. And this is literally the most important step, and everything that comes after is defined by that. For some listings, the unique and unusual design is the key thing, and it is the whole experience, and that's great. However, not all listings can be that, but at least you should be able to aim for a gorgeous design that photographs well, that completes or complements the experience of staying at your house. So who do you think is coming here? It could be single people, like on a business trip, or just looking for like a Zen retreat. That's definitely what we got at this house sometimes. It could be couples, and even for couples, there's different scenarios, right? Like there's people looking for a romantic getaway. There's people who are on an adventure and just need a place to stay the night. And there are people who look for just budget, no frills type stuff. So defining who those couples might be will help you narrow down what kind of vibe you should go for in this house. Some other houses might be targeting families and groups with multi-generational living. So that might inform what kind of gear you need to stock. That might inform how well stocked your kitchen needs to be, and whether baby gear and books and other games might be useful. Also, do you need kid-proof furniture if you're aiming for groups like that? Yet another kind of group is the bachelor party / bachelorette party kind of group. And yes, we are not supposed to have parties at Airbnbs, of course, but usually for these groups of young people, they still want to have a place to congregate before they head out for the night for their activities. And if that's the target demographic, that changes the entire vibe versus like a family kind of house. From a design standpoint, a group of young people probably would value having an Instagram-friendly photo op. You know the kind of colorful, high contrast, fits really well into a square frame. So some groups would value that more than others. And those are just a few of the possible demographics you may be aiming for. If you're wondering, how do I know who's coming here? Well, hopefully you would have already done some market research before investing in your Airbnb. But if not, or if you're looking for additional information, local tourism websites are actually pretty good as far as getting numbers for facts and figures in how many people are visiting this area and what kind of demographic they may be. Another really useful one is just going on YouTube. So like type in the destination and then travel vlog. And that might help you get a sense of what kind of visitors are coming through to this area, what activities are they looking for, are they traveling in groups or in like pairs? See if you can gain some information from those travel videos, what they liked and disliked about their trip. After figuring out your target demographic, I want you to keep that in your head and remember this guest avatar because that'll be super important for your design. I want you to design everything around the needs and preferences of this one person. And that would help ensure your design is cohesive. Step number 2 is the design style. Now that you know your guest avatar, you can take that in conjunction with your existing building structure and any existing furniture you have and have to incorporate, plus your personal preferences. This should inform what kind of vibe and design style you need to go for. What do I mean by design style? There are many styles of designs: boho, modern, mid-century modern versus modern modern, traditional, coastal, eccentric, whimsical, like rustic. There are so many ways to design your space. I find it less important to name the exact style, and I also find it unnecessary to fit into one box. Often, many styles overlap. You might be a little bit modern, but a little bit casual and boho. You can blend different things together. What's important is you have a clear idea of where your vision is going. Start by researching different styles and collecting pictures of designs you like, or ideas or images of what you want to incorporate in your house. For this step of the research process, I like using the House app. I really enjoy their interface. It's very easy to use, and they have a huge library of different kinds of styles, and it's really easy to search and filter out what I'm looking for. It's really easy to save. I like to just save all these images into kind of a library of my own for each project, and I can easily also point out what I like about that picture. Sometimes it's really just one chair that I wanted to remember, or like a certain way the wallpaper contrasts the window, for example. So I really like that function in House, and I'll leave a link down below for that. The other place I like to look for pictures and ideas is Dwell, because my preferences lean really modern, and they tend to have very hyper modern architectural cool images. So I go there too. I know some people use Pinterest. Pinterest is not my favorite. It tends to be a little more dated, a little more suburban, if you know what I mean. I found Pinterest to be generally inundated with designs that are like a little older. Another really good resource is House and Home. They have a channel here on YouTube, and I adore their videos. They interview designers and they walk through like their whole design process for each project. And they have like a little Canadian accent, which I just adore. I love how they explain their design decisions, the difficulties or barriers they encounter with each project. Like, for example, there's a pillar here that you need to work around, or there's like specific needs that the owner is asking for, and that is really hard to accommodate with a certain floor plan, and they come up with creative ways. I get a lot of useful functional ideas from watching their videos, and I highly suggest you check them out. And obviously, research is a little bit easier if you go along with your own personal aesthetic. I know for me, this tiny house was way easier because it aligns with our primary residence and what we like in general. I'd call this like warm, casual, modern, that juxtaposes very hard, angular, cold metal lines with like really organic plants and like stones and woods. The contrast of texture, like a laminated high gloss surface right next to something really soft and fuzzy. The contrast in colors of black and white, organic versus inorganic. So for me, researching and designing this was really easy versus like the beach house where the style is a little more coastal. That took a little more time on my part to research and really understand what that style is about. As you're looking through these pictures and doing your research, try to pay attention to the form, the shapes. Are they like rounded? Are they angular? Are they very geometric? Try to pay attention to patterns. Are they all very clean lines, or are there textural elements woven in? You also want to take note of different colors. Are they muted colors, bright colors, more of a black and white palette, more neutral, versus how do people incorporate color in that style if that's something you're looking to do. You want to look for different textures, like what kind of fabrics are being used, what kinds of wood or metal or stone best exemplify this kind of style. You also want to take note of negative space, and this is especially common in modern minimalist spaces. It's not all about what you put in it, is about what you leave blank. And so take note of how does that draw your eye, or how is the placement of negative space relative to everything else. As you're researching, try to remember what you already have. So any furniture pieces that you want or need to keep, and any structural elements that can inform your design styles. So for example, if you're in a boxy modern house, it probably makes sense to kind of lean into that and go more modern. If you're in a cabin, it doesn't necessitate that you put everything like traditional cabin style, but there is a limit, like coastal would be really hard to fit into that, right? Like my recommendation is to not fight what you have. Incorporate some of the pictures of the house exterior or some of the furniture pieces that you own and add that to your house library. And that would help you visualize existing elements of style with what you're hoping to achieve. And while we're on the topic of design style, I know some people go for themes. I don't recommend like cheesy theme-ish type stuff. Like for example, some people would put a lot of starfishes and shells and sand type stuff on a beach house. One or two probably isn't harmful, but generally I don't feel like they add a lot of design element, and it can read as kind of cheesy. So I usually shy away from that. The only time I think a theme is appropriate is if you're like taking a huge risk and doing like an all pink crazy Barbie house. And if that's the case, you do you. But for most of us who are designing for a kind of broader customer base, going too heavy on the theme might not be the way to go. At this stage of the design process, you don't need the exact pieces yet. If you see something, however, obviously save it, like something that is so special and so unique that you have to have and you want to design the whole room around that one furniture piece, that's fine. But at this stage, you're really just looking for ideas, looking for patterns, looking for textures. I found that shops can be a little distracting sometimes if you get really carried away and browse and end up limiting yourself to what is available and in existence. Try to focus at this stage on formulating a vision and know that whatever you're aiming for, you should be able to find somewhere. Step number 3 is to smash the like button. Did you do it? It does something magical to the YouTube algorithm and it helps me reach more people, so thank you. Moving on to step number 3, functional elements. At this stage, you want to create a very rough outline of kind of a shopping list, not the exact items, but just the general categories of things you're looking for. So for example, a bed, a TV. I would encourage you at this stage to leave it very open-ended. So if you're thinking, oh yeah, I need a space for someone to sit by the entryway to put on shoes, instead of putting a bench or entryway bench or entryway stool or whatever, literally just put thing for people to sit on to put on shoes. I find that really helpful in terms of not blocking my mind off to thinking, oh yeah, now I'm looking for an ottoman or now I'm looking for a bench. There are many things that could serve that purpose. And so by writing down just the function of it, it allows you to stay open-minded. You might find like a cubby that is also a shoe shelf, but you can add a cushion on top and make it functionally an entryway bench. Or you might find you don't have enough space, you're in a tiny house, and really your guest will have to borrow the ottoman that's by the armchair to serve as an entryway bench if they want to sit down to put on shoes. So try to stay open-minded at this stage and focus on listing out the functional elements that you need. I personally used Google Sheets. I had a column for the functional element that I'm looking for, and then it was really easy to build out next columns for the cost of an item once I found it, the link to where I found it, and images if I wanted to add that to the same sheet so I can visualize everything together. And at this stage, it's pretty big picture, so I wouldn't worry too much about putting in exact bedding, what kind of candles you're putting in the space, unless obviously you find something that you think is super inspiring and is a must-have. Back to my previous point on creativity, here are a few tips on designing small spaces. A dual-purpose bedside table. So instead of having standalone bedside tables on each side of the bed, we chose to use one that is also functioning as a coffee table for this armchair, and on the other side we put a dresser that functions for both. Really, for the person in bed, you probably just need a space for a glass of water, you might need a space for your phone while it's charging, and so this should serve both purposes. Another idea is to mount the TV. This clears up a lot of space. The only thing really to keep in mind here is that when you mount the TV, then there are wires unless you drill a hole and get the wires to thread through. And so if you have wires showing, at least have a console table or some sort of thing that kind of minimizes the view of wires just hanging around. The next idea I have for you is, instead of a typical catch-all table that people might need at the entryway to put down keys or wallet or their phone while they're putting on shoes or taking off shoes, or kind of just a catch-all table, instead of that, we just made sure we had a surface that people can use, which in this case is just the mini fridge. In the bathroom, we need a space for people to put their clean clothes on, or like another towel while they're in the shower. And because this space is pretty small, there's not very much counter space. And I know I personally don't like putting clothes on top of the closed toilet seat. It just feels wrong. Well, so what we did here is that we added a stool that looks cute, very irregular shaped and organic, that fits with the design, but it also functions as a spot to put clean clothes while someone is in the shower. By the entryway, we needed somewhere to hang coats. We hosted people mostly in the winter time, and so instead of just a basic hook that we can find anywhere, we took that opportunity to make it a design element for something nice to look at on the wall. We found this handmade hook from Etsy, and it's functional and it goes really well with the space, and it's quite a bit more interesting than buying just a basic hook for coats to go on. Another thing you might encounter for small spaces is the weird placement of rugs. Now, in this area where we have our bed, there is kind of a standard expectation that the rug kind of goes by the side of the bed and also at the foot of the bed, and so that is somewhat fixed. However, on this side, we still have a sitting area, and the rug isn't quite big enough to extend to that area. And if we got a bigger rug, then it's like kind of out of proportion with the queen bed and it cuts into the walkway space here. And so our solution was to have overlapping rugs. However, here's the other problem. With overlapping rugs, it can be tricky to style to make it not look wrong. And so the way we worked around that is to find an irregular shaped rug with a completely different texture, such that it looks like a logical addition instead of an afterthought where you feel like, oh, well, now this space is blank. I need to like put something to fill that empty space. As you're creating your list on these functional elements, some of them will be super obvious, like a bed, a TV, a chair, a desk. Some of them will be less clear in the beginning, and I really encourage you to kind of walk through your space as if you were coming in as a guest. Where would you take off your shoes? Where would those shoes go? Would these be snow boots? And if so, they would be dripping water, there would be salt on them. Where should those go so that they don't track along the house? For winter, where would the coats go? If it's a beach house and someone's coming back, they're wet and sandy, where would all their beach gear, their wagon, all of their sandy shoes, where do those things go? Think about yourself as you would lay in bed, right? Like, where would you plug in your phone? Is the outlet at a reasonable spot for someone laying in bed? Is there a way to turn off the light while in bed? Where can someone put their suitcase? This tends to be a problem for smaller houses and smaller rooms. Where can they open a suitcase fully and dig through their stuff? And then if someone has skincare and makeup and hair stuff, where can that go? If you have a smaller counter space, there might not be space for a makeup bag. So where would someone reasonably do their makeup? Is there a mirror there? How is the lighting situation? If you have a dedicated workspace like this one, and people will probably be using their laptops, is there a plug-in? Is there a space for a light to go? We actually had to add this because that was not originally available when we built the house. And you may be thinking, isn't this getting too granular? Like, isn't the whole point just to get good pictures? Well, no. Nice photos will get someone to click on your listing, browse around, give you points on the interest algorithm, hopefully eventually book the listing. However, once they book, their experience at the house is what gets you the 5-star rating. And that experience depends not just on form, but also on function. I think this is such an important point and it's worth repeating. Good photos will get you the booking, but the good experience is what gets you the 5-star review, which then allows you to get more bookings, allows you to maybe charge more than your competitors, and allows you generally to be more successful. Next, step number 4, and this happens simultaneously as step number 3 as you're defining functional items. Step number 4 is measuring everything. And I mean literally everything, vertical and horizontal. Vertical as in like how much height do you have until you get to your windows? Where are all the outlets and light switches located? And by horizontal, I mean kind of the typical floor plan. From wall to wall, what are the dimensions? After you've obtained your measurements, there's many ways to handle this. You could either use like nice interior design software where like you would map out your floor plan and then you can put in furniture pieces and play around that way. Or you can just doodle, which is what I did a lot of. The benefit of doodling is just that you can do it on the go whenever you have an idea. When creativity strikes, you can have it on paper. Another method I used in designing a really irregularly shaped room where it's not super obvious where the couch should go and what size couch it could fit was using the grid paper method. So in this method, go online and search for a grid paper. You can print out the grid paper, make sure you mark down what the scale is. So like, is 5 boxes 1 foot or whatever scale you decide makes sense for the space. You would then draw out the shape of the room on this grid paper based on your preset scale. You would then print additional grid paper to draw out your furniture pieces. So if you have in mind a 72-inch couch, then you would just kind of go by that same scale and cut out a couch. And then you might have a choice of like 3 different kinds of coffee tables, a round one that's giant, 3 little circles, or like a rectangular one. And you would look at the dimensions of those products and draw them out on this grid paper, again, to scale, and then cut them out. And this would allow you to play around manually. This is kind of like the cheap way of not using software. But it also has the benefit of like visualizing something, right? The benefit of visualizing how everything is laid out on a floor plan. There's a lot more flexibility if you can just manually draw something out. You can color it, you can shape it. Like an oval shaped couch, you can more easily draw that. And it also saves you the time from learning interior design software if this is not something you already know how to do. For the doodle method, you really just want to make sure you have a master copy of all the measurements somewhere. I saved mine on Trello, just describing how tall is the window, how far is that away from the ground, where the sockets are and whatnot. And based on that information, you can doodle out whatever you're imagining at that moment. The downside, obviously, is this is not easy to replicate. And so each time you want to tweak an idea, you pretty much have to redraw it. But the upside I found is that this is the easiest to communicate to someone else. Like I can show my husband this picture and be like, oh yeah, I get it. I get what you're trying to do. Versus the grid paper method, sometimes it's a little harder to visualize both the aerial view from the floor plan, in addition to the side view, the eye level view of how someone might actually experience the room as they walk in. And this brings me to my next point. The vertical view or the eye level view is in many ways more important than the floor plan because that's how someone actually experiences a space. That's what they see. That's what you're able to photograph. You don't photograph a floor plan. You photograph it like as someone would see it, right? And so typically I would start by anchoring the main furniture pieces, like deciding, okay, this is where the bed has to go. This is where the couch has to go. After the bigger pieces are roughly in place, then I start to imagine the space in an eye level view. If I look at the space from here and the bed goes right there and then the chair goes right there and here's a window, then clearly this is missing some art. Like vertically I can tell. Viewing it vertically makes it so much easier to tell where art should be placed, where plants should be placed. Where does the wall feel like it needs to be occupied? Where might it feel cluttered? What can I do to create a little moment? And this is also where I start imagining the photograph that I would use for Airbnb. So as you know, with the 2022 update, the first few pictures, if you're scrolling on mobile or even on the website, I think, the first few, before you click on the listing, those are squares. After you click on the listing, landscape photos would be preferred. So how do you make sure you have amazing first few photos at least that function really well as a square and also a landscape photo once expanded? So this would be the stage where I imagine a square frame, being placed onto my design. Is it missing plants? Is it missing color? Is it missing just something on the wall? Is it off balance?
what can I convey in that square picture? I know it feels a little backwards to design for the picture and not for the experience, but ideally you want both, right? You want people to click on it and be interested first before they can book and experience how cool your space is. So that is really the first step. And so you just don't want that to be an afterthought. You have this beautiful, well-designed space that happens to have 0 good square pictures, right? Like that would be silly. Now you may be wondering, well, Lydia, you said we don't need to pick out the exact furnitures yet. How do I know what measurements these things are and how can I start drawing a floor plan? Well, that's true, but a queen size bed is a queen size bed. You can have a rough idea of what sizes a chair is, or a rug, or a bed, or roughly a TV is pretty standard, right? So start with that. And you may find that as you put things onto the floor plan, the limits of the floor plan will actually inform you what size chair you'll need to look for, or what size bench, what height of a light you need to find. And so unless you come across a very specific piece of furniture that you cannot live without, that the entire design needs to surround that piece, you can find something that fits in most cases. And of course, this whole floor plan is a living document, right? As you find more and more pieces, you would then make adjustments. Maybe you can't have a king bed and maybe you need to make it a queen. Stuff like that. You can continue to adjust as you go along. So those are my first 4 steps in the process. In next week's video, we'll do part 2, which is steps 5 through 9, which includes making a budget, shopping, and kind of executing and setting everything up and stocking the Airbnb listing. And at the end of this next video, I'll also be doing a full tour of our tiny house to show you all the design details in action. Make sure you're subscribed so that you don't miss that next video, and I'll talk to you next week.